Hey Sea Dragons, welcome to Art. I'm Mr. Horner. In this video, we're going to learn all about shading. Shading is a drawing technique that helps you make your drawing look more 3D and realistic. We're going to do some step-by-step drawing, and I'm going to show you a few tricks for you to remember to help you get better at shading. Let's get started by looking at some art, and you'll see how artists use shading in their artwork. Here are two cubes, so you can see the difference between a cube with no shading here on the left and one with shading over here on the right. On this left cube, we're just drawing with lines to create what we're looking at, that cube. And on the right one, the front of the cube has a little bit of shading done with pencil, just making that a little bit darker. The side is even more darker than that. Then there's a cast shadow on the ground behind the cube that's also dark. So those shadows help make this cube look more 3D. What I mean by 3D is it's like it's popping off the page. It looks like it could be actually sitting on a table in front of us. Artists who do very realistic portrait art like this one pay attention to shading in their artwork. This artist, Kehinde Wiley, did this portrait of Ibrahima Sakho, who's a famous soccer player, and he used light paint for the light parts and a medium color paint and then a dark paint for the shadows. You can see there's some shadow on the side of the face here where it's darker, some shadow underneath the chin here where it's darker, and by showing the light and shadow, it makes the face look more 3D, realistic, because it's just like how the artist saw it in real life. So it kind of tricks our eyes into seeing all this paint that's just on a flat thing look like a real face. This artist, Albrecht Dürer, lived about 500 years ago, but he also used shading in his artwork. And we can see the shading in this one under the hare's chest here, under its chin where it's a little darker. This right side of its face is darker than the left side. And going behind the rabbit here on its back in the little folds, there's some shading in there too. We also noticed this cast shadow on the ground. This makes it look like the hair is on a surface and not just floating around in space. When we see a cast shadow like this, this tells our eyes that the light was coming from the opposite side. The light comes in from the left here, and we can see it shining on this left side of the hair. These light spots all along here, that's the light shining on the rabbit. Then, since the rabbit is absorbing that light and blocking that light, there's a shadow behind it. You might have noticed this if you've ever done shadow puppets with your hands. Your hand blocks the light and creates a shape on the wall. Or maybe when you're outside in the summer and there's a dark shadow on the ground and you see what it does when you move your arms, that's a cast shadow that's projected from your shape. It's blocking the light and creating a shape on the ground. Many artists use shading in portraits and in animal art like we've seen here, but they'll also use it when they're drawing objects or places and buildings, trees, anything that they want to make look realistic. Some artists choose to just use color or shapes or lines and patterns without shading to focus more on the feeling of the artwork, while others like to show a realistic picture. Please go ahead and get your pencil and paper ready, and we'll do some drawing together now. We're going to draw a cube together, and I'd like you to follow along step by step. So have your paper and pencil ready to go. We're going to start with a square. Just make a square. Sorry if it's pretty blurry. I had to give back the webcam I was borrowing that was a little better than this one. But for the cube, it won't really matter. Okay, there's our square. Now from this bottom corner, I'd like you to make a line that's going to go up and out. So it's a diagonal line coming from that corner like this.
Now up at the top corner here, I'd like you to do the same line, same angle, same length off of this corner, and one more just like that on this corner. So we're adding 3 lines that are all the same length and direction, just like that. Now let's connect this line with a line going straight down to this one, and also connect it to this one over here. So that was across here and across here to close in those parts of the box. There's our cube. Now we're going to add the magical shading. So let's say that our light is coming from this direction. Usually light is coming from up high because a lot of times it's the sun that's shining light on what we're drawing. Sometimes it's a window. It's usually coming from the side and up high. So it's going to come in like this. We're going to leave the top white. We're going to, because it's catching a lot of light, we're going to make this lightly shaded. Now to lightly shade, I hold my pencil kind of funny. I hold it way back here because I can't push very hard on the pencil tip if I hold it back like this. When you hold it up here, you can push really hard, but for right now, we want to have a light touch. So we can shade in this face very lightly, just a light gray. I'm not pushing hard at all. I'm just letting the pencil skim along the surface to color that a light gray. Now this other side here, let's do the same pressure. Fill that in the same gray. Go over it one time to make it the same. And then we're going to go over it one more time, pushing a little bit harder, just slightly more to make that darker. Adding a second layer usually makes things darker. There, that looks pretty cool, looking pretty 3D. The last thing we want to add is that cast shadow. So since our light is coming from the left, our cast shadow is going to go to the right. So from this bottom corner here, I'd like you to make a line that goes out and up, but not the same as this one. It needs to go out and up over here a little bit. We're going to go out to about there. So it's a little bit longer. Then kind of anywhere along here, I'd say about halfway or at a third, right here, we're going to make our line connect down here. And I'm still drawing light because I don't want to make dark lines for this. Usually shadows don't have a dark outline, so we make them a very light outline so that they'll be hidden when we shade it in. Now let's shade in this shadow, and this time we're going to go lightly, but we're going to go over the cast shadow 3 times until it's darker than the dark side. That's my second time over, and one more time over. I'm carefully watching this edge here so we can still see the edge of the cube, and here, and filling that in one more time to make that dark. And that's 3 times over that. So now we've made a bright white, a light gray, a medium gray, and a black. So we have 3 different tones we made with the same pencil just by changing the pressure on the pencil. One more quick trick here is if you add a line, like a horizon line behind the cube, as if it's going straight across behind there, it looks like the cube is sitting on a table or sitting in a desert or something. It makes it feel more like it's on a surface by adding that line, and that there's space behind it because there's an area that we can't see behind the cube going back to where that line is. Just helps our illusion of 3D here. I'm going to draw this orange here, and this is pretty similar to how a head would be shaded in a portrait, just with less noses and ears and things to make it complicated. But it's the same kind of idea because we have the light coming from the left here, the shadow to the right, and some different grays that we're going to put in, different shadow tones that we'll put in with our pencil. So you can follow along step by step here. I know it looks kind of dark. This is because I have just one light on in the room to make sure I only have one shadow to make the drawing easier. Also, if it's too bright, my camera won't show the paper. Anyway, let's start with a circle for our orange. I'm going to try to draw it the same size as I see it in real life, about. Okay, there's my circle. And I'm going to put in my cast shadow here too, just very lightly around here. So I see it starts right underneath, a little to the right of the center, and going up this way. It's kind of a funny shape. It stretches out here. Shadow doesn't exactly match the shape of the orange. Stretches, and then it's coming back in about here. I can see where the shadow touches back to the orange there. Okay, so that's about how our orange will look. Now we're going to start putting in some light grays like we started with on the cube, because we're going to build up, we're going to add layers just like we did on that cube. Remember to hold your pencil with a light touch. Now this here is the lightest part of the orange. We don't want to color that in at all. That's going to be our white part. We call that a highlight. So I'm going to make like a circle around that that's kind of off limits. That's my highlight. I want to leave that there. That's about where I see it on the orange, so I put it there. Now we're going to fill in the whole orange with some light gray, and I'm going to use circling, curving marks, going around, going very lightly, softly, curving marks everywhere around except for that highlight. Since that highlight is the only part that's going to be that light, we know we can fill everything else in a bit darker. Alright, now let's go to the next darkest part. And to help me see where I should go next, I'm going to squint my eyes. I'm looking at the orange on the screen, squinting my eyes. What's the next dark part after our light gray? Our light gray is kind of in this area, that bright orange. That's what we have for light gray. So next, let's go to this part where it's kind of red. And we're going to add a layer there. That's kind of a C shape. Let's make a very light line where that's going to be a C shape in here. Going back and forth with curving marks because the orange is curved. Like that. Now squint your eyes again at that orange. It's getting darker going over this way. If you look carefully, right in here, it's kind of a light spot again. So we'll fill this in a little bit darker, all of this. Then we're going to make even darker in those areas, leaving this lighter. Okay, more curving marks, going lightly in here. And okay, our next dark part, it's this area, like I was saying, here, kind of a triangle, and down here, almost a triangle shape. Let's do this here. Leaving some of this medium gray in here, making this part dark. And leaving some medium gray here, making this part dark. Okay, let's fill in our shadow. Squint your eyes. That shadow is about as dark as our darkest part on the orange. As dark as these. So that was about 4 layers of pencil. Let's fill that in until it's the same darkness. About 4 layers. So this time I'm kind of using straight marks because the table that the orange is sitting on is flat and straight, so it doesn't need to be curved like the orange was. Build these up, darker, darker. Being careful around that edge of the orange. And I'm going to make this part closest to the orange a bit darker than the outside, so it fades a little from dark in here to light, a lighter dark out at the edge here, just like this. Okay, right up close to the orange in here is extra dark, just a little bit. Like that. Okay, so that already looks like we have a ball that is shaded and sitting on a surface. To make it look more like the orange, we need to put this little bit of detail here. So to simplify that, I'm going to make a little circle for the top of the stem. That's about here, above that. And I'm going to make it a little bit taller on one side, a little bit darker there. Have these little crevices on the orange. Those are just going to be some soft little lines, little scribbles here. Coming out from that stem. Okay, now I'm looking. What else does it need to look right? I think I'm going to go back over a couple of areas. I think my highlight, I left that spot white, but I think I left a larger spot than I need to. And it doesn't need to be so circular. I think I'll roughly fill that in a little bit, adding to my gray area and making this circle turn into something more like this blob of that highlight, just by scribbling into the edge a little bit. I think this area is slightly darker. Fill that in. We're getting really close, almost done. Maybe a little bit underneath here. Dots in that highlight because the orange is all speckly. Okay, let's call that good. I think that looks like an orange sitting on the table with the shadow, and you get the idea of how that works, how we're paying attention to the light direction and squinting our eyes to help us see what's light and what's dark, and trying to put that right in where we see it on the real thing. Here's a few things you might have at home that you could practice shading with. There's a white cup with saucer if you have it, but a light color kind of cup. An egg is good for practicing shading. You can see the nice shadow around it. A banana is nice and smooth and has some fun shapes to draw. A folded piece of paper can work really well. Light colored things like all these things here allow you to see the shadows easier than dark things. You want to pick something that has a simple shape with not too many details and has a light color like these. If you have time and you want to practice more shading, choose one more object after that cube and orange. I'm doing a banana. If you have a banana at home, that's probably a good item to start with. And just do one more drawing where you're looking carefully at that object and drawing it. And then you're going to shade it after, just how you see it. That's just if you're interested and you have time. I just want you to send your best drawing that you got to do send that to me on Seesaw, whether that's the orange, the cube, or another thing that you chose to do afterward. I just hope you have fun with this. I know it can be challenging. Don't be discouraged if it was pretty hard for you. This takes so many years of practice to get really good at. I'm still learning new things every time I draw and shade. So don't be discouraged by your first attempt. Try and do some more after that. Try some different things out and try what's going to be interesting for you. Okay, I'm going to time lapse the rest of this so that you can see it, and I'll talk to you in a minute. I had a problem with my video, so you didn't get to see all of the banana drawing happening, but here it is all finished. When you post your drawings to Seesaw, I'd like to see what your best drawing is, or if you've done your drawings on one paper, you can put them together, and I would love to see all your work. I'd like to know what's something you learned that helped you with shading, and what's something that you did that you didn't know you could do. Have a great day. I'll see you later.